Hi again. Welcome back to Sofeast's China Manufacturing Decoded podcast. I'm Adrian from the team and I'm hosting this week, and our CEO Renaud joins me. Renaud, welcome.
Hello. Yeah, how are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, good. And how are you?
Not bad, not bad. The weather
Mm,
is getting a little bit less hot here in South China. After a
yeah.
long, long time of continuous rain and then got really hot. Anyway, um,
Mm.
we're getting into the nice part of the year here.
Yes, it's a good time to visit if you're thinking of heading out there to see
Mm,
suppliers or to come and visit us. Yeah, it's
mm.
sort of October time. I don't know. You're probably looking at high 20s in degrees C. Sorry, American listeners. I'm not sure what that would be in Fahrenheit.
Yeah, mid to high, but less, it gets less humid also, right?
Yeah.
Which is a big difference.
Absolutely. So good episode last week with Andrew talking about reliability data. So that was a decent deep dive on there, which can actually help you to make better products and save money. So if you haven't heard that one yet, you can always go back into the catalog and listen to it. This week, we're talking about manufacturing org charts, and in particular, some of the learnings that you're going to be able to get from checking your supplier's org chart. Because although this is kind of like it's going to be like a flow chart that lists different people doing different things or different departments, we can learn some quite interesting and quite important things when we have a look at it. So that's going to be the most important part of this particular podcast episode. But just to start off, a quick introduction into what an org chart is, just to get everybody up to speed.
So an organizational chart, when you're a pretty small company and things are informal, you don't really need one, right? But when you start to grow and your organization becomes a bit complex and everything, you try to distribute the lines of authority and responsibility, right, across, let's say, the senior managers. Okay, like you handle, I don't know, service provision or production, and then you handle sales and marketing and so on, and then you handle the finance and accounting and legal and IT, or things like that. And then within each department, then you cascade the again, who like from, I don't know, for example, the COO, and then you might have someone like a production manager and a warehouse manager, and and maybe a purchasing manager, or you might cut it differently and you might say, well, there's like the manufacturing operations, and you just have manufacturing, like maybe different production workshops, and then on the other hand, maybe some supply chain operations with purchasing, warehouse, planning, and so on, right? You can cut it in different ways, and the ways you cut it actually is quite important to support your company strategy, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let me see. A lot of things could be said about that, but basically, if you think of the army, you have the like, I don't know, the five-star general, and then as you go down, you see, who are the colonels and the corporals, the lieutenants, the surgeons,
Mm-hmm.
and so on, all the way down to the individual privates, right? And everybody knows, okay, I'm in that battalion or in that regiment or whatever, right? And they know who is their officer, commanding officer, right? And then that commanding officer knows who their commanding officer is, and so on and so forth. And this is very hierarchical, okay? Or you could look at the Catholic Church, same thing. You have the Pope, and then you have like the cardinals, and I don't know, the archbishops, and whatever they call it, and all the way to the local priests, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knows who they report to, and if that cardinal in that country or that part of that country, something happens in his territory, he's the one on the hook. He's the one who's going to have to, it comes up to him in the end, right? If it's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everybody there sort of has to listen to him, right? So that's the org chart. That's basically that's what it is. I think everybody has seen the organizational charts. A lot of manufacturers actually show it on their website. Maybe not into the small details, but showing the main departments and everything. So all the buyers and people in quality have seen that already, right? So what we want to do basically is think about it and think of what different signs maybe can tell us about the way that this or that factory is run.
As we move on into the next section, which is what we can actually learn from looking at an org chart. I don't think it's only who is in the org chart. Also, I think it's the nature of the structure of it as well. We can even learn from that. And that's probably one of the points that you're going to get into. So I think you got about maybe 7 learnings in particular that we can get in a manufacturing sense from looking at an org chart. So if we go through those.
Yeah. So some of them are pretty basic and everybody will say, oh yeah, right. And some of them are maybe a bit more to be discussed, let's say. Maybe it might be weird, might make sense in certain circumstances, might not make sense in other circumstances. So the one usually, and I saw it also in some audit checklist, and I saw some buyers pay attention to it, especially with relatively small factories, is do they have a quality department? Okay, do they have, like when we see the lines of the different departments and the lines of authority, right? You can see what the main departments are. And then if you see that there's the general manager or CEO or whatever, and then under the reporting to the CEO is maybe someone takes care of finance, someone takes care of production, and I don't know, maybe someone taking care of purchasing, and maybe 2 or 3 other things, and that's it. And you look down and you look down and you don't see quality anywhere. Well, what does that mean? So nowadays you don't see that like blatantly missing. In a very small sort of workshop where you have, a few dozen people at most, they don't even have an org chart anyway, right? But it's sort of informal org chart, right? If you ask the boss, so who are your main managers? Okay, it's going to be the production guy and right? And okay, and what are your like the different teams in the company? And if they don't even say that, oh, these 3 guys there are doing inspections, well, they're just focused on pushing materials out the door, basically, right? Who really owns the quality function? In most cases, it means nobody, right? And then they will say, oh, like the general manager himself will say, oh no, I pay a lot of attention to this. I'm always like walking on the shop floor. And I'm the one who trains the inspectors to do this and that. I'm the one or the workers, and like, I'm the one who reviews the quality before it goes out. And some buyers are like, oh, this is great. Wow, even at the top of the company, this is a great sign of a very healthy culture. But what I think is, wait a minute, when this guy is busy because there's a big issue somewhere, or where he goes on a trade show, or he's sick, or goes on holiday or whatever,
then what?
Who's going to be there looking at it, right? Is he chained to the factory? He never goes out? Come on, let's be serious here, right? So this is usually an issue with small workshops. Not really an issue with companies that are larger, especially when they start to say, well, we are ISO 9001 certified, blah, 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 because ISO 9001 will push them to clarify. Now, the standard itself doesn't say you have to have an org chart or it has to be in that standard, that format or that format. It doesn't say anything like that. But they always like to make it a bit more formal, and like they have these consultants who say, oh, you show all of this to the auditors and we'll be all okay. And then they have some kind of org chart, very generic, might not really make sense for their company, that might not correspond to the realities of actually who manages what part of the business or anything, but they have something. And there will always be something about quality because the consultants know that you have to show that you have, someone taking care of quality and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this is really only a problem with small companies. That first issue.
Okay.
If we go into the second issue that we listed, it will be that you look at the org chart, you look for the quality manager or quality director or quality whatever, because you're looking for his team. And then you see that he reports to the production manager, which is a very interesting thing, which might work in a company that has highly sophisticated management systems. But usually in the companies I've seen in China that have this kind of issue, that's a red flag because the production department, the production manager, for someone who's been visiting Chinese factories, you think of the production manager, he is the one who keeps pushing, who keeps saying, no, this has to go, come on guys, and we have to finish this before tonight, otherwise you have to keep working, he's going to push the workshop supervisors and the team leaders, and he's going to push back against maybe some inspector who says, there's this problem here, you should put it aside and rework, and so on. Because everybody will blame him when there are delays. Like the sales people will say, hey, you didn't tell us this would be delayed, the customer, blah, 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 there's big penalties, we have to send by air, it's going to be very expensive, and then, everybody looks at him, and then in turn, he will have to blame some others, right? He will, but this part from the supplier came late, and then this part from the suppliers, they had some quality issues, we had to sort them out, it slowed us down, blah, 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 right? So there's always sort of finger pointing like that. But he pushes back. If you tell him, well, if you have someone who does quality control and say you have some issues, you have to slow down, you have to do this and this, you have to put some manpower on reworking this, he won't be happy, right? And a typical production manager, if he is not restrained by anything, he'll just say, whatever, let's just keep moving the materials. Maybe let's pay attention from now on, but the stuff already made is fine. Let's just pack it in cartons and ship it out. It will be fine, right? This is something we've seen so many times. So if you put let's say a quality supervisor under that production manager is going to do whatever he wants. He will listen when he wants to listen, will not listen when he will not want to listen. So you will have an unrestrained production manager, which tends to be quite dangerous. Okay, you will have a lot of bad stuff, maybe not his fault, maybe it's bad stuff from the suppliers, maybe whatever, right? But he will not want to have his production efficiencies go down just because he had to do more sorting manually, he had to do some rework and so on, right? So when I see that, is really a red flag. Now, when I say that more sophisticated companies make it work, they make it work well, a very highly sophisticated company, and think, Toyota and the likes of Toyota, right? So we don't see that so often. Basically, the production manager is responsible really for quality, is responsible for the quality of his work at least. And then the purchasing department and like supplier quality management and so on, they work together, they're responsible for supplier quality, right? And if the production manager makes some decisions to keep pushing things out, even though there are quality problems, it will come back to bite him in the rear end. He will have KPIs that will be impacted in a way that's significant enough, to change his behavior, let's say, right? But I still have to see that in a typical Chinese manufacturing company. Our mistake number 3 that we listed is interesting. Is also about the production department. And basically, production department, you want them to keep working in the most efficient manner possible, right? So that you have the highest labor productivity, not just labor and equipment productivity, but usually labor is the defining factor for cost at the end of the day, the main deciding factor. So it's really about labor productivity. Now,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to be measured typically against standard times. You say, well, let's say, when we develop a new product and it gets close to mass production, we, the engineers that put together the samples look at it and maybe with a production engineer, and then they will say, well, this should take whatever, 45 seconds per product, right? In assembly, let's say, assembly.
Mm-hmm.
And the planning department will take that information and will use it to measure the efficiencies of the production department. If they have a mass production order of 5,000 pieces, well, then they will have to spend, in theory, 45 seconds times 5,000 pieces. And then how many people are going to be on that assembly line for how long and so on. And then the planning department will collect the data because they have to keep an eye on the resource utilization, right? Because it impacts their plan for next week and the week after and so on. In other words, well, this was 79% efficiency, this was 90% efficiency and so on. And you want these teams to be separate, otherwise it's a little bit too easy for the production guys to just say, oh, just lower the standard or whatever, right? Because then the efficiencies will look better and everybody will look better. This is sort of a minor thing. And again, with the right measurement systems and the right company culture, you don't have to do it that way. With a good ERP system also, you don't have to worry too much about that because, not everybody will be able to change it, and then it will be tracked. People will see, it's logged who changed it. But really, people in production anyway should not have the permissions to make that change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this one is a little bit as an aside, but it kind of shows that they haven't really thought of how to collect KPIs for the production department. And very often, actually, the most worrying at all is that they don't have a planning department. Or maybe it doesn't have to be a department, right? But they don't have someone doing planning. It's maybe there's, again, small companies will be the production manager in his mind, or maybe he has some whiteboards and writes a few things to remember, right? And that's it. And he's trying to keep it all together as best as he can, which usually doesn't mean very well. And then sometimes you see, oh, this person is doing planning. Okay, how are they doing planning? Again, is it part of their ERP system? Are they using the production control and material control modules of the system, for example, SAP? Or are they doing it in Excel? How are they doing it in Excel? Is it very systematic? Are they actually taking into account like all the steps that can happen? And so it's interesting to look into it because it will show you if the company is actually relatively well organized and trying to minimize the chances of something going wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
It also means that they will not tell you the bad news at the very last moment when they just find out, oh, we're going to be late. We cannot make it for that container of Thursday night, right? They should see things in advance. Oh, that supplier was a bit late, and then we have some issues. We need the supplier to do this rework or something, and it's pushing everything back. We don't have the packaging materials yet, and all these typical things. Oh, the other production batches were a bit late, so it's pushing this one a bit late also. They can see in advance if they're going to make it or not with a relatively high accuracy, if they have the proper system and if their general processes are relatively stable, right? If they keep firefighting with like supplier quality issues and supplier delays and internal problems and machines that break down and stop, this batch and that batch. Forget it. It's not even the problem of the planning system here. It's a problem of just the stability of all the processes. Uh, they cannot do any planning basically, or it's going to be so inaccurate anyways, because it's such a mess, right? So they have to stabilize things first, which
Yeah.
leads us to mistake number 5. So there's a certain category of engineers that don't work on product, like product design, product development, and things like that. But they work more on the systems and the processes. And they are called industrial engineers, process engineers, manufacturing engineers. Different companies will use different terms, sometimes for the same thing, right? And well, do they have a team um, of manufacturing engineers, right?
Mm.
If you see a big company and they don't have a team of manufacturing engineers, and then you ask about that, they say, oh, the production manager knows exactly what to do and blah, blah, blah. Well, who's going to do the proactive work of actually thinking, planning for the processes and following up on all the issues and tackling the issues one by one? Typically, this correlates very much with what I just described before, which is very unstable kinds of operations. Very, very unstable, where you always have some problems and everybody is in a totally reactive mode.
Mm.
And it's just, yeah, firefighting and, oh, we don't know what's going on. Oh, we have this new product we're releasing and we have all
Mm.
these problems. And now we have to do a bunch of rework. And, oh, and this one, boy, are things so slow. We have no clue. And so on and so forth, right? If you don't have these
Mm-hmm.
kind of engineers, ah, it's terrible.
Well,
It's
it's all
terrible.
on the production manager, isn't it, to handle everything?
Sort of, yeah, because then things will be pushed into to production, even when a product is not ready to be industrialized. So they will have to figure things out on the fly, maybe with
Mm.
the product engineers who worked on it and like managed the project and everything, did maybe some of the design and development, right? But there's this missing link of the people who will actually think what, in terms of layout and processes and, and what equipment is needed and how to train the people and whatever, how to balance the lines. So, and looking at the bottlenecks so that the whole line, is not slowed down excessively by one of the stations and so on and so forth, right? There's a lot
Mm.
to it. But if nobody does that job, then management will be sucked into all these problems. And that is not good. That is not good because in the end, it translates obviously into delayed shipments, but also usually quality issues. When you have a bad process, you have a bad process.
Mm.
And in the end, it also means higher cost for the manufacturer and a very messy and confusing system, and that gets pushed, back down to the customer. Right. So this is not good. This is not good.
No.
Now, another mistake also is you look for the HR manager. So again, very small company, they probably don't have a HR manager. It's going to be some of the line managers who will do the try to find candidates and recruit them, and maybe they use a headhunter for specialized positions and their personal networks and so on and so forth. Okay, that can work well. But at a certain stage, they need to have an HR manager. I mean, an HR manager has basically two roles. One is to work on, nowadays people say talent and culture, right? So it's finding the right people and recruiting, interviewing and so on, and basically hiring the right people and keeping the right culture in the company. And the other half of that is compliance with, having a labor contract that's compliant and making sure people are fired the right way and they're not going to sue the company and so on and so forth.
Mm.
Right. So at some point they need an HR manager or HRBP, as they say often in China, a business partner, I mean. So someone
Mm.
who understands the needs of the business and basically defends the business.
If you're looking for a supplier that's not going to get you into hot water from a social responsibility and
Right.
employees' rights and following legal business practices point of, which it can be an issue in China
Mm.
as in other Asian countries for sure. That
Mm.
seems like it's an important thing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. If you look at social compliance, it's mostly about HR practices.
Mm.
And if you have a sneaky HR guy who does like what a sneaky quality guy does for ISO 9001 kind of audits,
Mm.
but you're going to have a lot of fake paperwork also, right?
Mm.
So it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. So if they have an HR manager, but is way below in the organization, it's basically going to be someone looking after paperwork and so on, not really someone looking at talent and culture, right? So that usually tells you something.
Yeah.
Who is taking care of talent and culture? Are they doing something about it? Or are they just hiring some warm bodies that happen to cross the street at the right moment and
Mm.
are okay to sign the contract? Okay.
Mm.
And another one, yeah, we saw it a number of times. And you look at the titles and you're like, what is that? Certain things are very misleading. So sometimes you look at the org chart and you see there's like a top level, whatever, general manager, whatever they call it. And then under you have, I remember one company, they had four general managers. And
Mm.
then they say, oh, I handle this part of the business and that part of the business, but there was no logic. Um, that was messed up. Like that was really messed
Mm.
up. And that company was messed up. Okay. Sometimes, yeah, things just don't really make sense. You have on the same level, you have a production manager, you have an operation manager, and you're like, okay, so operation includes what? Does it include production or not? And then, it's just very confusing. It's also confusing to the people who join their company, right? It's just creating a lot of confusion usually, except if they have a good explanation. And again, if the company has their own strategy and their own structure, so it can make a lot of sense. But this is the kind of things is good to ask. Mm. And then finally, something we saw a number of times that very often you have the GM, and then the line goes down, but then there's something coming out on the side there, which is usually called a vice GM, Fuzhong in Chinese. And then we look at it and then, oh, okay, so the GM is not here. We can talk to the vice GM then. Okay, because it's someone who has an overall view of the whole company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we, and the person say, oh no no no, I'm just like the assistant of the Mishu,
Mm.
the little assistant of the GM. Like I don't know anything about that. I'm not a manager at all. I don't know. I have no clue. Oh, okay, so why does this show you as the vice GM then, right? Just to give some face or something. Anyway.
It's great on the resume.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You see some people that are, oh, vice GM. Okay, what exactly does that mean, right? Usually it doesn't mean vice GM. So
Mm.
yeah, this is the list of things that we've seen over time. There's a good book that explains this. If like in your company you want to think about the org chart and what to implement, how to follow some good practices. There's
Mm.
a consultant called Lex Cisney who wrote, actually, he's got a book called organizationalphysics.com, and he has a lot of very good points about the org chart. And he has a book that came out maybe 1 year ago or 2 years ago called Design to Scale. So we'll put this in we'll include a link to this in the show notes. But
Yep.
it's really a good resource for people who are wondering, okay, maybe there's a better way for us also to do that.
Mm. Absolutely. So, I mean, if you're sourcing, I guess this is really important information. This is something not to overlook when you're looking into potential new suppliers, or when you're working with suppliers. It's something to keep an eye on.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you can see the org chart very fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes on the website, otherwise you go to the company and maybe you can ask for it, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes it can lead you to ask some questions and get some interesting answers.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see some really weird things, like I mentioned.
Absolutely. So some good learning, some important red flags to look out for there. And
Mm.
that's org charts. As Renaud said in the show notes, we got some interesting books so that you can have a look at, and other related links. We will be back next week as we normally are. Thanks to the listeners, and thank you, Renaud.
All right, thank you.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.